My girlfriend left me for my rich cousin and my family humiliated me. Years later, I returned and denied them the help they begged for. It wasn't a scream that ended my life as I knew it. There were no broken plates, no dramatic door slams, not even a heated argument in the rain like in the movies Adriana used to adore. It was a whisper. A sentence delivered with the coldness of someone who had rehearsed the moment in front of a mirror for months, waiting for the precise instant to inflict maximum damage with minimum effort. Juan, I don't love you anymore, and I think I deserve something better. We were sitting in the living room of my apartment, a modest but cozy place I had painted 2 weeks earlier, thinking she would like the ivory color. I struggled to pay the rent, putting in extra hours at the logistics consulting firm where I worked, earning about $2,500 a month. It wasn't a fortune, but it allowed us to live with dignity and save for the future, or so I thought. I looked at Adriana. Her green eyes, the ones that used to look at me with a mixture of admiration and tenderness, were now empty, as if she were staring at a blank wall. We had been together for 4 years. 4 years of building, of planning, of dreaming. I was 26, she was 24. I thought we were a team. Something better? I asked, my voice breaking. My mind couldn't process the information. Had I done something wrong? Had I forgotten an anniversary? She sighed. A sound heavy with impatience, as if she were dealing with a slow child. It's not about what you did, Juan. It's about who you are. You're stagnant and boring. You have no real ambition. You're content with this apartment, with that used car, with those vacations at the local beach. I want the world, and I've found someone who can give it to me now, not in 10 years. The air left my lungs. Before I could ask who this someone was, the door opened. He hadn't rung the bell. He simply walked in because he had a key. It was Diego, my cousin. Diego was 2 years older than me. The golden child of my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Manuel, he grew up surrounded by luxuries my parents, Catalina and Luis, could never afford. While I studied on scholarships and worked nights, Diego got new cars for every birthday and traveled to Europe when he got bored with collegiate degree he took 7 years to finish because he couldn't find his passion. Diego walked in with that smug smile that had always nauseated me. He was wearing a leather jacket that cost more than my monthly salary, and the keys to his new sports car jingled in his hand. You told him, babe? He asked, ignoring my presence as if I were just another piece of furniture. Adriana stood up and walked to him. Diego wrapped an arm around her, marking his territory, looking me straight in the eye with a mix of mockery and pity. This is a joke, I managed to articulate, getting to my feet. My legs were trembling. It's not a joke, cousin, Diego said, letting out a short laugh. It's evolution. Adriana needs a man, not a long-term project. I spat, feeling anger begin to replace the pain. You're the man, Diego. You don't even pay your own credit card. Your parents support you. My parents support me because they know I have potential, he replied, unfazed. And money is money, Juan. It doesn't matter where it comes from, it matters who spends it. And I know how to spend it on her. You only know how to save for a future that never arrives. I looked at Adriana, searching for a trace of shame, of regret. I found nothing. I only saw calculation. She had done the math, and I had come up short. Get out, I said to Diego. And take her with you. That's the plan, he said. Adriana picked up her purse. Before leaving, she paused for a moment and looked at me one last time. Don't take it personally, Juan. You just didn't know how to take care of me. You let routine kill the magic. Diego has reminded me what it feels like to be alive. The door closed behind them. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard in my life. If I thought the betrayal from Adriana and Diego was rock bottom, I was wrong. The real blow, the one that truly broke me, came a week later. During the Sunday family lunch. I didn't want to go. The pain was too raw. But my mother, Catalina, insisted. You can't pull away from the family, Juan. We're all you have, she told me over the phone, her voice tearful. So I went, with the naive hope of finding comfort, of my parents, my aunts and uncles, someone, being outraged by what had been done to me. I arrived at my grandparents' house, a large old home where we always gathered. As I entered the dining room, I froze. Diego and Adriana were there. They were sitting together, holding hands, laughing at something my Uncle Manuel had said. When they saw me enter, the conversation stopped abruptly, but there was no guilt on their faces. There was defiance. Juan, son, sit down, my father, Luis, said, pointing to an empty chair at the far end of the table, away from the happy couple. I sat down, feeling bile rise in my throat. What are they doing here? I asked in a low voice, but in the silence of the dining room, it sounded like a shout. My Aunt Patricia, a woman who had always measured people's worth by the brand of their shoes, spoke up. Juan, please, don't make a scene. Diego and Adriana are in love. These things happen. The heart doesn't choose. The heart? I repeated, incredulous. Auntie, she was my girlfriend a week ago. He's my cousin. Doesn't that seem sick? Watch your words. Uncle Manuel boomed, slamming his hand on the table. Diego has done nothing wrong. He saw the girl wasn't happy, and he acted. That's what real men do. They seize opportunities. I looked to my parents for defense. My mother lowered her gaze to her bowl of soup. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Son, my father said softly. Maybe you should reflect on what happened. Adriana told us you were neglecting her, that you worked too much, that you never wanted to go out to nice places. A woman needs attention, Juan. I felt as if I had been slapped across the face. I was neglecting her. My voice trembled with rage. I worked 12-hour days to pay for the apartment, to save for our wedding, to pay off the credit card debt she brought with her. I paid off $4,000 of her debt last month. Adriana let out a theatrical sob and buried her face in Diego's shoulder. See what you do. Diego shouted. Always throwing things in her face. You're a cheapskate, Juan. You count every penny. That's not love, that's a transaction. I don't need to count pennies to make her happy. Because the money isn't yours, you idiot. I spat. Enough, my grandfather intervened from the head of the table. He was a hard, old-school man. Juan, you lost the girl. Accept it like a man. If she went with Diego, it's because Diego offers her something you don't. Don't come to this table bringing bitterness. Here, we celebrate family unity. If you can't be happy for your cousin, then you shouldn't be here. I looked around the table, at familiar faces, blood of my blood, and all of them, absolutely all of them, were looking at me as if I were the problem, as if my pain was an inconvenience to their perfect family Sunday. My parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, remained silent, complicit in my humiliation so as not to upset Uncle Manuel, who, after all, occasionally lent them money for their own failed businesses. I realized a brutal truth then. I was the black sheep, not for being bad, but for being the only one not playing their game of appearances. Diego was success, even if it was fake and funded by others. I was effort, and to them, effort without immediate, flashy results was synonymous with failure. I stood up slowly. You're right, I said, and my voice sounded strangely calm. I shouldn't be here. Sit down and finish your food. Don't be childish, said my Aunt Patricia. No. Enjoy your family unity. Enjoy Diego's success. But listen to this carefully. When this all comes crashing down, and it will, because nothing built on filth can stand and come looking for me. Don't be so dramatic, Diego laughed. Go cry in your poor little apartment. We're off to Paris next week. I walked out of that house without looking back. As I walked to my car, a 5-year-old sedan that ran perfectly, I heard the laughter resume inside the house. They had erased me in a matter of seconds. The following months were a gray hell. Loneliness isn't poetic, it's physical. It aches in your chest, it weighs on your shoulders. Every corner of my city reminded me of Adriana. Every family gathering I didn't attend, and soon they stopped inviting me as a reminder of my exile. I learned about their lives through social media, a digital masochism I couldn't avoid at first. Pictures of Adriana and Diego in Paris, in New York, on rented yachts. She wore new jewelry, he wore Italian suits. My parents would call occasionally, not to ask how I was, but to tell me how well the couple was doing and to suggest I should apologize to Uncle Manuel to regain my place in the family. They have a beautiful apartment in the most exclusive area, my mother would tell me. Uncle Manuel bought it for them as an engagement present. You should see the ring, Juan, it's enormous. I'm happy for them, I would lie, and hang up. But hate is a powerful fuel if you know how to refine it. I spent the first few weeks drinking and wallowing until one morning, looking in the mirror at a gaunt, pathetic man, I decided Diego had been right about one thing. I was a long-term project, but he had no idea what kind of project. I quit my job. I liquidated my savings. I sold everything that didn't fit into 2 suitcases, including the engagement ring I never got to give Adriana, and I bought a one-way plane ticket. I didn't want to be in the same city, or even the same state. I moved to a metropolis 2,000 miles away, a place where no one knew my last name, where no one knew I was the loser cousin. I got a job at a fintech company. I started at the bottom as a junior analyst, earning just enough to share a tiny apartment with 2 strangers. But I had a plan. For the next 5 years, I disappeared. I blocked my entire family on social media, changed my phone number, and gave the new one only to my parents with the strict condition that they use it only for real emergencies. My life became a monastic routine of self-improvement. I woke up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym. I channeled all my frustration, all my anger at Diego and Adriana. With every rep, with every mile I ran, my body changed. I was no longer the skinny, hunched-over guy. My shoulders broadened, my posture straightened. I learned how to dress not in flashy, expensive brands like Diego, but in well-fitting clothes, quality fabrics, sober colors. At work, I made myself indispensable. While others went out drinking on Fridays, I stayed late studying for certifications, learning new programming languages, understanding the markets. I wasn't doing it for the money, at least not at first. I was doing it to prove to myself that I had value, that my worth didn't depend on Uncle Manuel's approval. After 2 years, I was promoted to project manager. My salary jumped to $85,000 a year. After 3 years, I was headhunted by an aggressive competitor to lead their operations division. Salary, $140,000 plus bonuses. After 4 years, I invested in real estate. I bought a dilapidated duplex, renovated it myself on weekends learning plumbing and electricity from YouTube, and rented it out. After 5 years, I launched my own boutique consulting firm specializing in logistics efficiency for e-commerce. The money started pouring in. Not daddy's money like Diego's, but money stained with ink, sweat, and coffee. My money. With success came a mental clarity I hadn't expected. I stopped hating them. Hate requires energy, and I no longer had any to waste on people who contributed nothing to my life. Adriana and Diego became ghosts, memories of a past life that seemed to have happened to someone else. I started dating again. I met interesting, independent women, women who paid for their own dinners and had their own ambitions. I wasn't looking to fill the void Adriana left, because that void had already been filled with my own self-respect. But the past has a funny way of knocking on your door just when you think you've changed the locks. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office, a suite with a view of the city skyline, reviewing a $200,000 contract with a new client when my personal phone rang. It was my mother. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. I hesitated to answer, but that old filial instinct, that umbilical cord we never quite cut, made me swipe my finger across the screen. "Hello. Juan, son." My mother's voice sounded different. There was no reproach, none of her usual condescension. There was fear, and something else. Desperation. "What's wrong, Mom? Are you okay? Is Dad okay?" Yes, our health is fine. We're celebrating your grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. Their golden anniversary. Send them a gift from me. You know I don't go to those things. Juan, please," she begged. "Your grandfather is very old. This might be the last big party we have. He's been asking about you. Everyone asks about you. They say. We've heard you're doing very well." I smiled bitterly. So, the news had traveled. Some mutual acquaintance must have seen my professional profile or my company in a trade magazine. "I don't have time, Mom. I have a company to run. It's this Saturday. At the country club. It's going to be a big affair. Please, son. Just come. Do it for your grandparents. And we need to see you. Things aren't like they used to be." There was a silence on the line. I could hear my mother's ragged breathing. "What do you mean?" "Just come, Juan. Please. We miss you." I hung up the phone and turned to the window. I looked at the city I had conquered. I felt untouchable, but I knew it was a lie. If I didn't go, the doubt would always linger. If I didn't go, they would win, because they'd think I was still hurt, still hiding. Going wouldn't be a surrender, it would be a victory. I decided to go. But I wouldn't go as the one who left, the sad boy in the old sedan. I would go as who I am now. I booked a first-class flight. I rented a car at the destination airport, not a flashy sports car like the ones Diego loved, but a black, armored German sedan. Elegant and discreet, but one that screamed power to anyone who understood engines. I packed a suitcase with my best suits. I bought a watch I'd been eyeing for a while, a classic $10,000 Swiss chronograph, not to show off, but as a piece of armor. Saturday arrived. I drove toward my hometown with a supernatural calm. As I entered the city limits, I felt a pang of nostalgia, but it was fleeting. The streets seemed smaller, the buildings grayer. I had grown, the city had shrunk. I arrived at the country club. The valet's eyes widened when he saw the car. I handed him the keys and a $50 tip without a second glance. I walked into the event hall. There were chandeliers, tables with white tablecloths, soft music, the same old pretense. I saw my uncles, my distant cousins, my parents. And then I saw them. They were near the bar. Diego was holding a glass of whiskey like it was a life raft. He had gained weight. His face was puffy and red, marked by someone who drinks too much and sleeps too little. His suit, though expensive, was tight on him and had a visible stain on the lapel. His once perfect hair was thinning at the crown. Beside him stood Adriana. I paused for a second. The image of the unattainable goddess I had kept in my memory crumbled. Adriana looked tired. Very tired. She wore a dress that looked several seasons old. Her makeup tried to hide deep dark circles and expression lines carved by bitterness, not laughter. She wasn't ugly, but her inner light, the spark that had made me fall in love with her, was extinguished. She looked like a 40-year-old woman trapped in a 30-year-old's body. Diego was whispering something aggressively in her ear, and she was staring at the floor, nodding in resignation. The golden couple, the ones who were going to take on the world, looked like they were being devoured by it. I took a deep breath, adjusted my cuffs, and walked toward the center of the room. It was my mother who saw me first. She dropped her glass and ran to me. "Juan! You came!" Her shout alerted the others. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. My father approached, giving me an awkward hug. I noticed he had aged a lot. His suit looked worn. "Son, it's so good you're here," my father said, his eyes moist. I greeted my grandparents with respect. My grandfather looked me up and down, assessing my suit, my watch, my posture. He nodded. A silent concession of approval that years ago would have made me happy, but now left me indifferent. Then the circle opened, and Uncle Manuel appeared. He no longer had that lion's arrogance. He looked smaller, stooped. "Juan," he said, forcing a smile. "The prodigal son returns. We've heard great things. They say you have your own company." "That's right, uncle. I'm doing well." "Excellent, excellent," he said, rubbing his hands nervously. "The family must always prosper." Behind him, Diego and Adriana approached. Adriana's reaction was visceral. Her eyes went wide. She scanned my figure from head to toe, lingering on the details that screamed success. There was a flash of something in her eyes. Regret? Desire? Calculation? Diego, on the other hand, scowled. He tried to adopt his old superior stance, but failed. He swayed slightly. He was drunk. Well, Diego slurred. The poor cousin bought himself a new suit. "Is it rented, Juan?" The silence in the group was tense. They were waiting for my reaction. They were waiting for the submissive one who would lower his head. I smiled. A calm, cold smile. "Hello, Diego. No, it's not rented. And neither is the car outside. How are you? You look weathered." Diego's face turned red. "I'm great. Investments. You know, the market's tough, but the smart ones survive. Adriana and I are. We're better than ever." Adriana said nothing. She just stared at me. "I'm glad to hear it," I said, and then turned to speak to another relative, cutting the interaction short as if Diego wasn't worth more than 2 seconds of my time. The party continued, but the dynamic had shifted. I was the center of gravity. Cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years came up to ask for business advice or just to be near me. My parents looked at me with a pride that felt alien and hypocritical, but I noticed something else. There was an undercurrent of tension. My Uncle Manuel and Aunt Patricia were whispering with my parents, casting furtive glances my way. Diego drank more and more, glaring with hatred from a corner. Adriana had disappeared to the restroom some time ago. Finally, after dinner, my father approached me. "Son, can we talk for a moment in your grandfather's study? Your Uncle Manuel wants to ask you something." There was the catch. I knew they hadn't called me just out of love. "Of course," I said. I entered the study. My Uncle Manuel, Aunt Patricia, my parents, and to my surprise, Diego were there. He was sitting on a leather sofa, looking like a scolded child. They closed the door. "Sit down, Juan," Uncle Manuel said, offering me a cigar, which I declined. "I'd rather stand." "What's this about?" Uncle Manuel sighed. He looked exhausted. "Look, Juan, we know there were problems in the past. Misunderstandings. Diego and you. Well, boys will be boys. But blood is blood. Family comes first. Get to the point, Manuel," I said, dropping the uncle. He flinched at the disrespect but said nothing. He was desperate. The family business, the construction company. It's been through a bad patch. A series of bad investments. The market changed. And Diego. Well, Diego tried to expand into an import business that didn't work out. Didn't work out, my Aunt Patricia interjected, tearfully. He was scammed. My poor boy was the victim of criminals. I glanced at Diego. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The point is, Manuel continued, we're in a delicate situation. Very delicate. We're about to lose the house. This house, your grandparents' house, is also mortgaged as collateral. I felt a mixture of shock and dark satisfaction. The house of cards had finally gotten wet. And what does this have to do with me? We need liquidity, my father interjected. Your uncle needs a loan, a bridge loan, just until a government contract closes next month. We know you're doing well. We know you have capital. How much are we talking about? I asked, purely out of morbid curiosity. $250,000, Manuel said quickly. We'll pay you interest. Double what the bank offers. Your family. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a dry, joyless laugh. Let me get this straight. 6 years ago, at this very table, you called me a failure, a cheapskate, and less of a man. Diego took my girlfriend and mocked my poverty. You, I said, pointing to my parents, told me it was my fault for not having money. And now you want my money to save the lifestyle you used to humiliate me. The past is the past. Aunt Patricia cried. You have to forget. Grudges are poison. Besides, there's another matter. She gave a signal, and the study door opened. Adriana walked in. Her eyes were red from crying. She stood by the door, hugging herself. Adriana and Diego are going through a difficult time, my mother said in a soft voice. Diego is very stressed because of the debts. He can't be a good husband right now. And Adriana. She has admitted she made a mistake. It took my brain a second to process the insinuation. I looked at Adriana. Juan, she said, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I was so stupid. I got carried away by the lights, by the promises. Diego isn't who I thought he was. He's a boy. You were always the man. You were always my rock. She took a step toward me. I've thought about you so much over the years, about what we had. If you helped us, if you helped the family, Diego could move to another city to start over. And maybe we could talk. Start again. I never stopped loving you, Juan. I was just confused. The silence in the room was absolute. They were offering me a package deal, save the family, get rid of Diego, and get Adriana back. As if she were a prize. As if my dignity had a price tag of $250,000. I looked at Diego. He was crying silently, defeated. He was willing to sell his wife just so Daddy could pay off his gambling debts or shady business deals. I looked at my parents. They waited eagerly, thinking this was what I had always wanted. I looked at Adriana. Beautiful, yes, but broken, and worst of all, transactional to her core. She was coming back to me not for love, but because I was now the provider, the winner. I felt a complete calm. The last vestige of pain in my heart evaporated, replaced by a crystal clarity. I walked to the door, passing Adriana without touching her. I put my hand on the doorknob. No. The word. Just one. It hung in the dense air of the study, heavy and absolute. It was as if I had fired a silenced weapon. There was no loud bang, but the impact was lethal. What did you say? Uncle Manuel stammered, his face losing what little color it had left. He loosened his tie as if the air had suddenly become unbreathable. I turned slowly, letting go of the doorknob to face them all one last time. I wanted this moment burned into their retinas. I said no, I repeated, enunciating each syllable with surgical precision. I'm not going to lend you $250,000. I'm not going to save the construction company. And I am definitely not going to buy Adriana's return as if she were a used piece of furniture you're trying to return to the store because it turned out to be defective. Juan, my Aunt Patricia shrieked, clutching her chest. This is your family. Your cousin could go to jail if he doesn't pay certain debts. Are you going to let your own blood rot? My own blood let me rot 6 years ago, I replied, my voice cold as ice. Diego isn't a victim, Auntie, he's a product of his upbringing. You taught him he could take whatever he wanted without consequences. You gave him cars he didn't deserve, positions he didn't earn, and women he didn't know how to value. Now that reality is sending him the bill, you want me to pay it? I walked over to Diego, who was still slumped on the sofa. I knelt down to be at eye level with his bloodshot eyes. Tell me, Diego, where's the potential? Where's the bright future? You told me I was a cheapskate, that my love was a transaction. Look at yourself now. You're willing to let your wife come back to me just so I can clean up your messes. That's not love, cousin. That's prostitution, and you're the pimp. Diego let out a choked sob but didn't have the courage to look at me. I stood up and faced Adriana. She was pale, tears streaming down her cheeks, ruining the makeup that tried to hide her decay. And you, Adriana. You didn't know how to take care of me, that's what you said. I want the world. Well, you had the world. You had the trips to Paris, the fancy dinners, the sports car. What happened? Did the money run out? And the love ran out with it? No, it's not just the money, Juan, she sobbed, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled away. He changed. He became aggressive, unfaithful. I miss you. I miss our peace. You don't miss me, I cut her off. You miss security. You miss having someone to solve your problems. If I were still that same logistics employee making $2,500 a month today, you wouldn't even look at me. You're looking at me because my suit costs more than your husband's car and because you know I can pull you out of this hole. But I have news for you, Adriana. I'm not that man anymore. And you are not the woman I loved. That woman died the day she walked out my door with my cousin. What I see now is just an opportunistic stranger. The silence was broken by my father, Luis, who stood up, trembling with indignation. Juan, that's enough, he shouted, though his voice lacked authority. You can't talk to us like this. We raised you, we gave you life. You have a moral obligation. Your grandparents are going to lose this house. Then sell it, I said with a shrug. Move into a small apartment. Learn to live within your means, like I had to. You didn't defend me when they humiliated me. You sat there quietly eating your soup because you were afraid of Manuel's money. Well, now Manuel has no money, and I have no fear. You're a monster, my mother whispered, looking at me as if I were a stranger. The money has corrupted you. No, Mom. The money has only revealed who all of you really are. Money is just an amplifier. It made Diego an arrogant fool. It made you servile. And me. It gave me the freedom to say no and walk out of here without looking back. I took my checkbook from my jacket's inner pocket. For a second, I saw a flicker of hope in Uncle Manuel's eyes. A pathetic spark of greed. I quickly wrote a check, tore it out, and let it fall onto the coffee table. Here's $20,000. Manuel looked at the check with contempt and confusion. That doesn't even cover 1 month's interest on the debt with the loan sharks. It's not for the debt, I clarified, buttoning my jacket. It's for my grandparents. So they can afford a dignified move or a deposit on a rental when the bank takes this place. Make sure it gets to them. If I find out a single cent of it goes to Diego's debts or Adriana's whims, my lawyers will make sure you regret it for the rest of your lives. I headed for the door. Juan, wait, Adriana said, her voice broken. What am I going to do? I have nowhere to go. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. Get a job, Adriana. Start from the bottom. It's amazing how much you learn about yourself when you earn your own bread. It'll do you good. I walked out of the study and closed the door behind me. The click of the latch was the most satisfying full stop of my life. I crossed the party hall, ignoring the curious stares from guests who had no idea that, just a few feet away, the family's core had just imploded. I stepped out into the cool night air. The valet brought my car. As I drove back to the city to catch my flight, I thought I would feel sad. I thought there would be pain. But there was only lightness. It was as if I had finally taken off a backpack full of rocks I had been carrying since childhood. Epilogue: 3 years later I'm sitting on the terrace of my house, a modern oceanfront property on the west coast. The sun is setting, painting the ocean in oranges and purples. I have a glass of wine in my hand and my laptop is closed on the table. My company was sold 6 months ago for an 8-figure sum. Now, I do private consulting and invest in startups run by hungry young people, the same kind of hunger I once had. I'm not alone. Inside the house, I can hear Clarissa laughing. Clarissa is an architect, a brilliant, funny, and fiercely independent woman I met at a conference. She doesn't need my money, which is what makes spending it on her a pleasure, not an obligation. We're expecting our first child next winter. I know little about my family, and what I do know comes from distant rumors that no longer bother me. I know they lost the grandparents' house. My grandparents now live in a state-funded nursing home, though I anonymously send a monthly supplement so they have better care and a private room. I don't want them to know it comes from me. I don't want to open that door. Uncle Manuel declared bankruptcy. He and Aunt Patricia live in a rented apartment in a peripheral neighborhood. He works as an insurance salesman, an ironic blow for someone who despised salaried employees. My parents are still with them, trapped in their own web of codependency and bitterness, blaming me for their misfortune at every family gathering, turning me into the villain of their story so they don't have to accept that they were the architects of their own ruin. Diego. Well, Diego got the ending he wrote for himself. Adriana left him 6 months after that night, when it became clear there was no money left to get. Diego ended up in legal trouble for petty fraud and spent some time in prison. He now works in a mechanic's shop under a boss who doesn't tolerate him being late. They say he's aged 20 years in 5. And Adriana. I saw her once, a year ago, by pure chance. I was on a business trip in my hometown, waiting for a coffee at a fast food chain. She was working behind the counter. She wore the company uniform and a hairnet. Our eyes met for a second. I saw shame in her eyes. I saw the impulse to hide. But I felt no satisfaction, no mockery, no desire to humiliate her further. She was working. She was standing on her own 2 feet, maybe for the first time in her life. I gave her a small, polite smile. I paid for my coffee and left a generous tip in the common jar, not directly to her, so as not to offend her. I walked out without saying a word. I didn't need to say anything. My life, my peace, my happiness. That was my message. I took the last sip of my wine and looked at the horizon. Clarissa came out onto the terrace, caressing her barely showing belly. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, kissing my forehead. "Nothing important," I replied, taking her hand. "Just thinking how good it is to be here, far from the noise." And it was true. The past was a foreign country I had no intention of ever visiting again. I had paid the price of loyalty to myself, and it was the best investment I had ever made.